My name is Phil, and I am fucked. In my final year of university, 3 retakes, a food delivery job, and a part-time job at McDonald's were already bad enough. But yesterday, I managed to make my life even worse. I was in a hurry with another order, weaving between cars on a bicycle, and here is the result: a deep scratch on the door of some Mercedes. The owner, a well-groomed man in an expensive suit, did not shout. He simply showed me the service station and named the price, $3,500. Either repairs or court, he said calmly. I'll give you a week. 3,500. With my earnings, it's like flying to the moon. Theoretically possible, practically, no. In delivery, I get a maximum of $50 per shift. In Mac, even less. I'm sitting at a bar with Tony, my only friend who hasn't stopped listening to my problems. The third beer makes things a little less shitty, but there's still no solution. Maybe we should take out a loan, Tony suggests. With my credit history? After I missed my rent? I smile bitterly. The most they'll give me is a kick in the ass. The bar is not crowded for a Friday night. The music is soft, and I notice that the man at the following table is listening too closely to our conversation. I'm going to take a pee, I say to Tony, standing up. In the toilet, I stare at my reflection for a long time. 23 years old, a good body, thanks to my job in delivery and former swimming training. But what's the point? My diploma is in jeopardy. I have a debt hanging around my neck, and my prospects are like a black hole. The toilet door opens, and the man sitting at the following table enters. He is about 12 years older than me, well-dressed and confident. Sorry to pry, he says, pulling out a business card, but I think I can help with your problem. I look at the card. James Hunter, escort agency. Come tomorrow at 9. He points to the address on the business card. Let's discuss the details. He leaves, leaving me confused. Escort? Me? But 3,500 in debt doesn't leave much choice. I return to Tony, tucking the card into my pocket. He doesn't need to know about this conversation. The office was in the business center, a glass building with security at the entrance and respectable people in suits. I felt out of place in jeans and a t-shirt. James met me in a spacious office. In the daylight, he looked even more impressive. He wore an expensive suit, moved confidently, and looked coldly assessing. Have a seat, he pointed to a leather chair. You look nervous. There are reasons. I tried to smile. It's not every day you get offers like that in a bar bathroom. He chuckled. I prefer to meet people in an informal setting. It's easier to evaluate a person that way. And what did you appreciate about me? Young, attractive, in a desperate situation. The ideal candidate. He opened his laptop. Our agency provides special services, companions for wealthy men of a certain orientation. My back went cold. You're asking me to become as an escort. No rough physical intimacy, communication, dinner together, some light flirting, nothing criminal. But I don't. Gay? He raised an eyebrow. That's even better. Many clients like that. A straight guy who makes an exception. He named the amount for the evening, and I felt my mouth go dry. $300. That's as much in one evening as I make in a week delivering. First client tonight, he said, handing over a folder. Address and details here. Decide now. I looked at the folder, thinking about the scratch on the Mercedes, the debt, and the week's deadline. $300 an evening, 12 evenings, and the problem was solved. I agree. My voice sounded hoarse. Excellent, he said, handing me an envelope. Here's an advance on a suit. You need to look the part. As I left the office, I felt like I had sold my soul to the devil, but what else could I do? A stranger looked at me in the dressing room mirror. The new suit fit perfectly, giving me a sense of respectability. Who would have thought I would spend an advance on clothes for meetings with men? The phone vibrated. A text from James with details of the first meeting. Mr. Richardson, 58, loves classical music and French wine. He was expecting a companion for dinner at his mansion. I rechecked the address, a wealthy area on the city's outskirts, where each house looks more like a small castle. What would I do there? What would I talk about with a man who probably makes as much in a day as I do in a year? On the way to the clothes shop, I managed to Google classical music and wine, at least some preparation, but my stomach clenched with fear whenever I thought about the upcoming evening. Just dinner, I repeated to myself, nothing more. But something told me it wasn't that simple. James was being too evasive, talking about special favors and light flirtations. I met Tony at the mall. I had to lie and say I got a job as a waiter at an expensive restaurant, hence the suit. I hate lying to my best friend, but how can I explain the truth? You look respectable, he whistled. Just like a businessman. If only he knew what kind of business awaited me. Returning home, I sat on the bed for a long time, looking at the clock. There were 3 hours left until the meeting. I could still refuse and find another way to get the money, but which one? The phone vibrated again. James, the car will be here in 2 hours. Don't be late. I looked at the suit hanging on the closet door. It was made of expensive fabric and had a perfect cut, like a piece of another life, a life without debts and problems with studies. Only 12 evenings, I said to my reflection. I can handle it. The mansion was precisely as I had imagined, a vast Victorian house with a well-kept garden and a fountain in front of the entrance. The butler led me into the living room, where Mr. Richardson was waiting. A tall, gray-haired man in an expensive suit. He looked me over from head to toe, and I felt like a product in a display case. Have a seat, he pointed to a chair. Wine? I nodded, trying not to show my nervousness. The wine was delicious, or at least expensive. I tried to remember everything I had read about French wines. James said you were a student, he began the small talk. Yes, final year journalism. Interesting. How did you end up in this agency? I told him about the bike and the scratch, trying to make the story humorous. He listened with a slight smile and gradually moved closer. So young and already in so much trouble? His hand rested on my knee. Let me help you relax. He sat behind me and began to knead my shoulders, after which his lips were on my neck. He slowly lowered his hands down and greedily grabbed my tool. I could not contain my emotions, after which he pushed me onto the bed, and we had sex. I got home around midnight. I had $300 in my pocket, the first step toward paying off the debt, but the price seemed too high. In my soul, I tried for a long time to wash away the memories of that evening. The touch, the smell of expensive cologne, and the taste of wine mixed into a surreal nightmare. The phone beeped, a message from James. The client is happy. New meeting tomorrow. I looked at the money on the table. 11 more evenings and I would be free. But could I stand it? The second meeting was completely different. John was not like other clients. No arrogance or condescension. He met me in a simple shirt and jeans with a warm smile. Come in, he said, opening the door of his house. I hope you like Italian food? I ordered pizza. I looked at him in surprise. Pizza? After all these expensive restaurants and fine wines? Relax. He noticed my confusion. No need to act. Just be yourself. We settled in the living room in front of the TV. John put on some comedy and poured wine into glasses. Everything was so normal, as if I were visiting an old friend. How did you get into this agency? He asked during the film. I told my story, about the bike, debt, and despair. He listened attentively, without judgment. You know, he said after a pause, I was once in a desperate situation too. Lost my job and almost lost my home. I know what it's like to feel cornered. And how did you get out? Someone helped. Now I try to help others. The evening flew by. We talked about everything, films, music, life. John was an engaging conversationalist with a great sense of humor. When it was time to leave, he handed me an envelope with money. Next week? Same time? I nodded, feeling a strange warmth inside. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel dirty or used. Thank you for the evening, I said sincerely. Thank you, he smiled. I haven't had such a pleasant time in a long time. On the way home, I thought about John. I thought about his kind eyes, warm smile, and how easy it was to talk to him. Something unique about him made me look forward to seeing him the next time. Over the past month, meetings with John have become more than work. We spend an evening together every week, watching movies, discussing books, and sharing stories from our lives. I learned he owned a construction company, loved classic rock, and traveled. He talked about the countries he had visited and the people he had met, and his stories made me dream of my own adventures. You remind me of me at your age, he once said, so lost, but so full of potential. That evening, we drank more than usual. Maybe that's why I decided to tell him the whole truth about the situation with the car, not only about the scratch, but also about the owner's threats and fear of the court. How much more do you need to collect? He asked after listening carefully. About 2,000. I looked into my glass. About another month of this kind of work. John was silent for a long time, then stood up and went to his office. He returned with a checkbook. I want to help, he said, writing a check. Not as a client, as a friend. I can't accept, I began, but he interrupted. You can, and you should. Consider it an investment in your future. I looked at the check, feeling tears welling up in my throat. $2,000. Freedom. Thank you. My voice shook. I'll return it, I promise. I know, he smiled, sitting down next to her. I believe in you. At that moment, something changed between us. Maybe it was the wine or the emotion of his actions, but the distance between us on the couch suddenly seemed too big. John looked at me in a way no one had ever looked at me before, with warmth, with understanding, with something else I was afraid to name. The next day, I woke up with a light heart. The car owner was surprisingly pleased with the prompt payment and even shook my hand goodbye. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The first thing I did was call John to thank him. He insisted that I come over to celebrate. "Tonight, no lateness," he said, "and it's not work. Just a friendly dinner." I arrived at 8. John met me with a bottle of expensive wine he usually saved for special occasions. "To freedom from debt," he toasted. We sat in his favorite living room, discussing everything under the sun. With each glass, the conversation became more frank. "You know," John said after his third bottle, "I haven't felt this connected to someone in a long time." His hand was on the back of the sofa, almost touching my shoulder. I felt the warmth of his body, the smell of his cologne. "Me too," I replied quietly. "You're special." I came closer to him and started kissing him, after which I knelt down, pulled down his pants, and began drying his tool. He did not hold back his emotions, but on the contrary, helped me with his hand, after which we had sex. Afterward, we lay on the couch, and I listened to his heartbeat. Everything seemed so right and natural. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just for tonight, forever." I raised my head, looking into his eyes. "Are you sure?" "More than that. I want to take care of you. I want to be with you." At that moment, I knew I was in love, not with his money or lifestyle, but with him, his kindness, understanding, and ability to see something more in me. Moving in with John changed my life. His house became my home. I had my own room, although I rarely slept in it, preferring his bedroom. I first called James and told him I would no longer work for the agency. He wasn't surprised. John warned me, "Good luck, boy." My studies became easier. I now had time and space to study. John even helped me with some of my student debts using his connections at the university. "You must complete your education," he said. "It is important for your future." Tony noticed the changes in me. "You've become somehow different," he said when we met. Happy. I couldn't tell him the truth. How could I explain that I was living with a man twice my age and that I felt protected and loved for the first time in my life? John never pressured me or demanded immediate answers about our relationship. He was just there, supportive and caring. "I know this is all new to you," he said. "We have time to figure it out." Sometimes I was plagued by doubts. What would people think? What would my parents say if they found out? Was he using me? But then I watched him make breakfast, humming his favorite rock hits, watching him work intently in his office, watching him smile when he saw me after a long day, and all doubts disappeared, because for the first time in my life, I felt I had found my place, my home, my person. 3 months have passed since I moved in with John. Life has found a new rhythm. Breakfasts together, studying, and evenings at home. I learned to cook his favorite dishes, and he helped me study. At university, I finally started showing promising results. The teachers noted my progress, and I understood that, in many ways, this was due to John's support and faith in me. "You were always capable," he said. "You just needed someone to believe in you." One evening, we were sitting in the garden watching the sunset. John was reading work papers, and I was studying for exams. "Phil," he said suddenly, putting the papers down, "I want you to know that I don't regret anything." I looked at him. "About what exactly?" "About us. About meeting you. About offering to stay." There was such sincerity in his voice that it took my breath away. "I know it hasn't been easy for you," he continued, "accepting your feelings, changing your life, but I see you blossoming, and that makes me happy." I walked up to him and hugged him from behind. "I don't regret it either. You taught me to be myself and not fear my feelings." We stood there for so long, looking at the stars. Suddenly, I realized, this is happiness. Not money, not status, but simple moments with a person who understands you without words. "I love you," I said out loud for the first time. John turned to me, tears glistening. "I love you, baby." A year has passed. I graduated with honors and now work in a publishing house. John helped with the interview, but I got the position with my knowledge and abilities. Our lives have settled into a calm, happy rhythm. In the mornings, we have breakfast together, discussing our plans for the day. We often sit in the garden in the evenings. He talks about work, and I share my writing ideas. Tony finally learned the truth. I was afraid of his reaction, but he surprised me. "The main thing is that you're happy," he said. "The rest is unimportant." James and I occasionally run into each other around town. He always smiles when he sees John and me together. I knew you were perfect for each other, he says. John recently asked me to become a partner in his business. Not because we're together, he explained, but because you're smart and capable. You have potential. Sometimes I think back to that day with the bike and the scratch on the car. Who would have thought that one mistake would lead to such happiness? You know, John once said, I'm grateful for that scratch. Without it, we would never have met. We are planning a trip to Europe next summer. John wants to show me all the places he has been and create new memories with me. Our age difference no longer seems like a problem. We complement each other. His experience and my energy, his stability and my dreams. Love doesn't look at the passport, he says. It looks into the heart. And I know he's right. When I look at him, I don't see a wealthy businessman. I don't see a man twice my age. I know a man who taught me to love and accept myself for who I am.